Once upon a time, in a small village called Ikem, there lived a young, honest girl called Ifoma. She lived with her parents and her two elder brothers called Emeka and Uzo. Ifoma's parents admired and adored her because she was very sincere and honest. But her elder brothers hated and disliked her because they thought she was too honest. Whenever they did anything bad or negative in the absence of their parents, Ifoma would report them to their parents when they returned, and this would always put them in trouble. Because of this, they always treated her badly and excluded her whenever they wanted to do something that was bad, because they knew she would say the truth if their parents would ask her. And this would make their father punish and flog them. But despite the way her brothers treated her, she never stopped being honest and truthful. When Ifoma was 12 years old, her father was diagnosed with a terminal illness. This made him unable to provide for the family anymore. Ifoma was very sad and hurt, but her brothers were happy because their father wouldn't be strong enough to beat them anymore when they did something wrong. They were too young to realize how deeply this would affect their family. Ifoma and her brothers had to drop out of school because there was no money to pay for their school fees, and their mother had to sell a lot of their properties to raise money for their father's treatment. Their mother also had to work more to feed the family. Ifoma's brothers were less concerned about everything. They would help people to clear their farmlands and get paid. Sometimes they would sell bushmeat which their traps caught in the market. They were contented with the little money they were earning from doing menial jobs. Sometimes they would give their mother some money out of the money they earned from working for other people. But her brothers did not stop treating her badly. They always maltreated her because of the many times she had reported them and gotten them punished or beaten. Yet, their wickedness towards her did not stop her from being honest and truthful. After 5 months, Ifoma's father died. Things went from bad to worse as her uncles came like wolves to share her father's properties. They didn't care about her mother, who was still grieving over the death of her husband. Ifoma's brothers were still very young, so they couldn't fight their wicked uncles. Her uncles denied them access to their father's farmlands. All they were left with was the house in which they were living in. The pain was too much for Ifoma's mother to bear, so she became depressed and eventually had a stroke. In some weeks, she also passed away, leaving Ifoma and her elder brothers at the mercy of her uncles. Immediately after Ifoma's mother was buried, her uncles came to claim the house in which they were living in. They sent Emeka and Uzo to the city to serve as an apprentice to a very wealthy businessman, while they sent Ifoma to another city to live with her aunt as a maid. Ifoma's aunt was a businesswoman. She had a very big supermarket with very few workers. She also had 2 spoiled children, a boy and a girl called Eze and Oma. She had over-pampered her children too much due to the absence of her husband, and they became very notorious and stubborn. She always granted their wishes and took their sides even when they were wrong. This made it very difficult for anyone to stay with them because they could not be corrected even when they did something wrong. When Ifeoma came to the city, her aunt left her at the mercy of her children. Ifeoma did all the chores in the house while her cousins did nothing. She did the cooking, washing, cleaning and maintenance of the home without any assistance from her aunts or cousins. Ifeoma's aunt enrolled Ifeoma in the same school as her kids, but Ifeoma always arrived at school late because her aunt would drop her children at school with her car, while Ifeoma would be left at home with a lot of chores. When Ifeoma was done doing the chores, she would have to walk to school. When she gets to school, the teachers would beat her for coming late without understanding why she always came to school late. One day, Ifeoma was cleaning her aunt's bathroom when she saw Eze and Oma sneak into her aunt's room. Ifeoma hid herself and didn't say a word. She just watched them as they checked their mother's bags for money and eventually stole some from where she kept money. When Ifeoma's aunt returned at night, Ifeoma told her aunt what she saw, but her aunt accused her of being the thief. She called her children in front of Ifeoma and asked them if they took her money, but her kids bluntly lied that they didn't even enter her room. Ifeoma's aunt became furious. She pounced on Ifeoma and started beating her. "Are you trying to say that my children are thieves? Tell me the truth and I will spare you. Tell me you stole the money and I will spare you." But Ifeoma refused to admit that she stole the money because she was innocent. Her aunt continued beating her mercilessly with a big cane, but Ifeoma refused to lie. She told her aunt that she would rather be flogged to death than to lie. When she saw that Ifeoma refused to admit despite how much she flogged her, she decided to let her go. After the incident about the stolen money, Ifeoma continued being honest all the time, even when she knew that her aunt would flog her. Despite how badly they treated Ifeoma, she took her studies very seriously. Every night, she would read her books and she tried to be the best in all her subjects. She knew that her best shot at being successful was by getting the best grades. Because of how intelligent she was, her teachers at school loved and admired her. They encouraged and supported her. Every bad child in the school avoided Ifeoma like a plague because they knew she would always say the truth, and this made her teachers love her even the more. Her teachers always believed her whenever she was called to be an eyewitness. Ifeoma had a favorite teacher in school called Mrs. Norma. She took Ifeoma as her own daughter, and during every break period, she would buy Ifeoma snacks because she noticed that unlike her cousins, Ifeoma didn't bring any money or food to school. Ifeoma and Mrs. Norma became very close until Mrs. Norma had to quit her job to open up her own school. The fact that Ifeoma was always the best in her class made her cousins very jealous. They hated her the more and would always give her unnecessary chores so that she would have less time to read and study. But Ifeoma was determined and her zeal gave her the strength to strive. One morning at the school assembly, the principal of their school wanted to reward the best students in front of everyone. The names of the best students were called out, and each of them was given an award. But when they called Ifeoma's name, she was not yet in school because she was running late. After the assembly, the teachers told the principal about Ifeoma and how brilliant she was, despite her lateness to school. They explained to the principal that her aunt was maltreating her and there's nothing they could do to help her. This touched the principal's heart, so he told the school security to bring Ifeoma to his office when she comes to school. A few hours later, Ifeoma was brought to the principal's office. When she entered the principal's office, she was scared. She felt she had done something wrong and would be expelled because she was always coming to school late. She went on her knees immediately. "Please, sir, forgive me. I'm sorry. It's not my fault that I am always late. My aunt and cousins are determined to keep it that way. Please, don't rusticate me. My only shot at life is through education." Ifeoma pleaded as if her life depended on it, even though she wasn't sure about why the principal summoned her to the office. The principal loved her instantly, but he also felt pity towards her. Ifeoma was very beautiful and intelligent, and her honesty and diligence only made people love her the more. "Please sit down," the principal said, but Ifeoma refused to stand up. She pleaded with the principal to forgive her first. The principal promised her that she wasn't in any trouble and asked her to sit down. When Ifeoma finally sat down, the principal asked her, "How did you know the meaning of the word rusticate if you're still in a junior class?" "I read a lot of books and novels, sir, so I learn new words." The principal was very impressed by her intelligence. He instructed the school security to always allow Ifeoma into the school premises whenever she comes to school late without flogging her. Ifeoma was very happy and she thanked the principal. But her cousins became very bitter when they realized that the security doesn't flog Ifeoma anymore even though she was late. One fateful day, Ifeoma's aunt came home with a big box of money. It was money paid to her by her new contractors, and it was too late to put it in the bank, so she brought it home. That night, her cousins took most of the money, then framed Ifeoma by putting one bundle of the stolen money in her bag, where it can be easily found. It was a foreign currency and had very high value. The next morning, when Ifeoma's aunt checked her box, she was shocked to realize that a huge amount of money was missing. She became furious and called the 3 children. "Who took the money in my box?" her aunt screamed. Ifeoma was very surprised because she had no idea that her aunt brought home money the previous night. Ifeoma told her aunt that she didn't know about the money. Her aunt refused to believe her. She went straight to her room and started searching her bags. Immediately she opened the first bag. She saw the bundle of money which her children planted in Ifeoma's bag. Out of anger, she started beating Ifeoma while Eze and Oma laughed and watched. She asked Ifeoma to provide the remaining money or move out of her house. With tears in Ifeoma's eyes, she cried and said to her aunt, "I have never stolen anything in your house since I arrived, and I have never lied to you or anyone before. Please believe me, I didn't take this money." But her aunt refused to believe her and sent her out of the house. She took her children to school and locked Ifeoma outside with her bags. She warned Ifeoma to leave and never return. Ifeoma was confused and didn't know what to do. She sat down by the roadside and started crying as she thought of her mother and father. While Ifeoma was crying by the roadside, her favorite teacher, Mrs. Nneoma, was driving by and saw Ifeoma. She quickly parked her car and ran to meet Ifeoma. "Why are you crying, and what are you doing outside by the roadside? Shouldn't you be in school?" Mrs. Nneoma asked. Ifeoma summoned courage and told her what happened. After she did, Mrs. Nneoma took pity on her and took Ifeoma to her house. She had 2 children, Gwen and Priska, and they were very beautiful and nice. They took Ifeoma as their own sister and treated her very nicely. Mrs. Nneoma waited, hoping that Ifeoma's aunt would start searching for Ifeoma. But she didn't. She simply employed another housemaid. Mrs. Nneoma decided not to meet Ifeoma's aunt and took Ifeoma as her own daughter. She enrolled Ifeoma into her new school, and as expected, Ifeoma did exceptionally well. After her high school, she sent Ifeoma abroad to study, together with her daughters. Many years later, Ifeoma and Mrs. Nneoma's daughters finished from the university with very good grades. She was among the very few applicants that were shortlisted for an interview in a very prestigious company. During the interview, the employers paid their staff to lie to the applicants. The staff would tell the applicants to lie that they've been to 10 countries if they are asked how many countries they've been to. They told them that it was a criteria that must be met. The applicants all believed the staffs because logically they were staff already with enough information and tips. When each applicant went inside and the question was asked, "How many countries have you been to?" the applicant would say 10 or even more. When they said this, the employer would dismiss them and promise to get back to them. But when Ifeoma entered the interview hall and was asked the same question, Ifeoma simply replied that she had only been to one other country to study. The interviewers were surprised but impressed by her sincerity, and they employed her instantly. As time went on, Ifeoma was promoted to the position of branch manager because of her honesty. She had a house and cars of her own. A few years down the line, Ifeoma needed some appliances and had to visit a popular market in a nearby state by herself. In that market, she saw her brothers, Emeka and Ozo. They were still struggling to get by. But she was very happy when she saw them. They hugged, and her brothers apologized for treating her harshly in the past. She was very independent and financially stable, so she took them to her house. Her brothers decided on the skill they would like to learn while she sponsored them to learn it. She got married later to a hardworking and supportive man. They were blessed with 3 beautiful children, and she taught them the power of sincerity and honesty. Her cousins, on the other hand, grew up to be spoiled brats. They were unable to finish college. Their unwillingness to focus on their academics pushed them to join bad companies which influenced them negatively. They were introduced to drugs and substance abuse. They were eventually discovered by the school authorities and expelled from the institution. They became drug addicts and resorted to stealing from their own mother to keep up with their lifestyle. When the money they would steal from their mother wasn't enough anymore, they engaged in armed robbery, swindling innocent civilians of their hard-earned money. Their mother knew of their bad ways, but ignored them because they had grown beyond her control. During one of their operations, they stole money from a prominent politician who had a tracker placed on his money. They hid the money at home, unknown to them that the money was being tracked. The police tracked the money to their mother's house when they were not at home, and they arrested their mother. They concluded that she was the one who sent them to steal the money. When Eze and Oma heard that their mother was arrested, they ran away from the country and left their mother at the mercy of the police. Ifeoma heard what had happened on the news and visited her aunt in the prison. Her aunt apologized for the way she treated Ifeoma and pleaded her for forgiveness. Ifeoma forgave her without thinking twice. She was grateful that her aunt made an effort to put her in school, even though she maltreated her. From time to time, Ifeoma would visit her aunt in prison to see how she was coping. Eze and Oma were never heard of anymore, but Ifeoma never stopped praying for them. A few years later, Ifeoma and her brothers went back to the village and gave both their parents a befitting burial. They took back all their father's properties that were previously snatched away by their uncles when they were powerless. The moral lesson of this story is to remind us that humility and honesty pays. The reward of honesty may not be immediate, but you will definitely reap the benefits. Ifeoma was successful because she was honest and everyone loved her for her sincerity. Despite the hardship it brought to her, she still maintained that virtue. Furthermore, we should not pay evil with good. An eye for an eye would make the world go blind. Good. Thank you so much for watching, and please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this story, give it a thumbs up, comment and share. Thank you and God bless you.